The stars looked different when you knew they belonged to someone else. Captain Jake Miller stood on the bridge of the UES Liberty, watching the distant points of light through the main view screen. Each star system out there was home to aliens who thought humans were nothing more than primitive animals, who had just learned to leave their home planet. Jake was 42 years old, with gray hair starting to show at his temples. He had been in space for 20 years, but this was his first time commanding humanity's most important ship. The Liberty was not beautiful like the alien vessels they had seen in the diplomatic videos. It was a big metal tube filled with engines, weapons, and 300 humans who were very far from home. "Captain, we're getting another transmission from the Hegemony fleet," said Amy Rodriguez from her communication station. She was young, maybe 25, with dark hair pulled back in a tight ponytail. Her voice was calm, but Jake could hear the worry underneath. "Put it through," Jake said. The view screen changed to show Admiral Zektar, the leader of the Hegemony forces. He looked like a giant lizard wearing armor with yellow eyes that seemed to glow. Behind him, Jake could see the bridge of his flagship, all smooth curves and glowing panels that pulsed with alien energy. "Human Captain Miller," Zektar said, his voice coming through the translator with a hiss. "This is your final warning. Surrender your pathetic vessel and return to your primitive world. Accept Hegemony rule or we will destroy every human in space and then burn your planet to ash." Jake looked around his bridge. His crew was watching him, waiting for his response. Lisa Carter, his tactical officer, was a short woman with blonde hair and sharp blue eyes. She had been running calculations for 3 days straight. Pete Johnson, his chief engineer, was a big man with rough hands who could fix anything with spare parts and determination. These people had families back on Earth. They had children who were counting on them to come home. "Admiral Zektar," Jake said calmly, "I have a counteroffer. Leave our space now and we won't destroy your fleet." Zektar's yellow eyes widened, and then he made a sound that the translator turned into laughter. "Your single ship against our 50,000 vessels? Human, your species' stupidity is even greater than we thought. We have ships that can crack planets. We have weapons that can boil oceans. Your metal box cannot even generate proper energy shields." "You're right," Jake said. "We can't make energy shields. We never learned how." "Then you will die like the primitive animals you are," Zektar snarled. "We give you 1 of your hours to reconsider. After that, we will show the galaxy what happens to species that refuse to kneel before the Hegemony." The transmission ended. The bridge was quiet for a moment. "Sir?" Amy said softly. "Long-range sensors are picking up their fleet. 50,000 ships, just like he said. Some of them are bigger than our space stations." Jake nodded. He had expected this. The Hegemony was the most powerful force in the galaxy, controlling hundreds of star systems. They had technology that humanity could barely understand. Their ships were grown rather than built, using living metal that could heal itself. Their weapons fired pure energy that could punch through any armor humans had ever made. "Lisa, what's our tactical situation?" Jake asked. Lisa Carter looked up from her console. "Not good, sir. Their fleet is arranged in a standard Hegemony battle formation. 50,000 vessels in a tight sphere, with the largest ships at the center. They're moving at 0.2 light speed and they'll be in weapons range in 6 hours. Any weaknesses in their formation?" Lisa smiled, and it was not a nice smile. "Actually, sir, it's perfect for our purposes. They're packed together tight, probably to show off their numbers. Maximum psychological impact." Pete Johnson spoke up from his engineering station. "Captain, all systems are green. The kinetic drives are running smooth and our special cargo is ready to deploy." Jake walked over to the tactical display. It showed the approaching Hegemony fleet as a red cloud moving toward the single green dot that represented the Liberty. Any sane person would look at this display and surrender immediately. The odds were 50,000 to 1, but humans had never been particularly sane. "Amy, open a channel to Earth," Jake said. "Channel open, sir. This is Captain Miller aboard the Liberty. We are about to engage the Hegemony fleet. If we don't make it back, tell everyone that we tried. Tell them that humans don't surrender." Jake closed the channel and turned to his crew. These men and women had volunteered for this mission knowing they might not return. They had left their families and their comfortable lives on Earth to fly into the unknown and face enemies with technology beyond their understanding. "People," Jake said. "We all know what we're up against. The Hegemony thinks we're primitive because we don't have energy weapons or living ships or any of their fancy technology. They think our ship is just a metal coffin with engines attached. He paused and looked at each face on the bridge. They're wrong. We might not have energy shields or plasma cannons, but we have something they don't understand. We have physics. Simple, basic physics that has been working the same way since the universe began. While they were learning to bend energy and grow their ships, we were learning to make things go very, very fast. Lisa Carter was checking her weapons console. All kinetic systems ready, Captain. Payload is armed and ready to deploy. Pete, how are our engines? Running at 100%, sir. We can hit 97% light speed whenever you give the word. Jake looked at the tactical display again. The hegemony fleet was getting closer. In a few hours, they would be close enough to start shooting. Their energy weapons could probably destroy the Liberty from 1,000,000 kilometers away, but they would have to see it coming first. All stations prepare for combat, Jake announced. This is what we came here to do. The galaxy is about to learn what humans can accomplish when someone threatens our home. The bridge crew bent to their tasks with quiet determination. Outside the viewports, the stars continued to shine, unaware that in a few hours, the balance of power in the galaxy was about to change forever. The Liberty flew on through the darkness, carrying its crew and its terrible secret toward a confrontation that would reshape everything. Admiral Zektar stood in the command center of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, watching the tactical display with satisfaction. 50,000 ships moved through space in perfect formation, the largest armada ever assembled in galactic history. Ships from 12 different species flew together under hegemony command, their hulls gleaming with bioluminescent patterns and energy fields. The human vessel appeared on his screen as a tiny red dot, alone in the vast emptiness between Earth and the advancing fleet. Zektar's scaled lips pulled back in what his species considered a smile. The foolish humans had chosen death over surrender. Commander Vex, Zektar called to his second-in-command, a tall insectoid being with 4 arms and compound eyes. What is the status of our fleet? All vessels report ready for combat, Admiral, Vex replied, his voice buzzing through the translator. The hegemony battle cruisers are at full power. The Zentari dreadnoughts have charged their plasma cannons. The Veltar ships have activated their phase weapons. Zektar nodded. Each species in the hegemony brought their own advanced technology to battle. Energy weapons that could melt through any known armor. Shields that could deflect laser beams and particle streams. Ships that could shift partially out of normal space to avoid enemy fire. Against all of this, the humans had sent one primitive vessel. What do we know about their ship? Zektar asked. A new voice spoke from the intelligence station. It belonged to Kethara, a female of Zektar's species who specialized in studying primitive cultures. The vessel is called the Liberty, Admiral. Our sensors show it is constructed entirely of metal alloys. No biocomponents, no energy matrix systems. It appears to use chemical rockets for propulsion. Zektar's laugh was a harsh sound that made several crew members step back. Chemical rockets? How did such a backward species even reach the stars? They appear to have developed a more advanced drive system recently, Kethara continued. But our analysis suggests it is still based on primitive kinetic principles rather than proper energy manipulation. Kinetic principles, Zektar repeated with amusement. They pushed themselves through space by throwing mass out the back of their ship, like children playing with toys. On the tactical display, the human ship remained motionless. It made no attempt to flee, showed no signs of powering weapons. It simply waited. Perhaps they have finally realized the hopelessness of their situation, Commander Vex suggested. Maybe they will surrender after all. No, Zektar said, studying the display. Humans are too stubborn for that. Our psychological profiles indicate they would rather die fighting than accept defeat. It is one of their few admirable qualities. The fleet continued its approach. 50,000 vessels moved like a school of deadly fish through the cosmic ocean. Their formation was a thing of beauty, with larger ships at the center surrounded by layers of smaller vessels. It was designed to present maximum firepower while protecting the command ships. Admiral, the communications officer announced, we are receiving a transmission from the human vessel. Put it through, Zektar ordered. Captain Miller's face appeared on the main screen. The human looked calm, almost relaxed. Behind him, Zektar could see the primitive bridge of the Liberty, with its simple control panels and basic displays. Admiral Zektar, Miller said, I wanted to thank you for gathering your fleet so close together. It's going to make our job much easier. Zektar's eyes narrowed. Your job, human? Our job is to send a message to the galaxy, Miller replied. The message is simple. Don't mess with Earth. You speak bravely for someone about to die, Zektar snarled. Do you not understand what you face? This fleet has conquered 1,000 worlds. We have weapons that can shatter moons. Miller nodded. I'm sure you do. Very impressive weapons, too. Energy-based, I assume. Plasma cannons, phase beams, that sort of thing? Of course. Only primitives still use kinetic weapons. Miller smiled, and something about that smile made Zektar uncomfortable. That's what we were hoping you would think. The transmission ended. Zektar stared at the blank screen for a moment, trying to understand what the human had meant. Admiral, the sensor operator called out. The human ship is moving. On the tactical display, the red dot representing the Liberty began to accelerate. But it was not fleeing. Instead, it was heading directly toward the hegemony fleet. Foolish, Zektar muttered. They mean to ram us. A suicide attack. Shall we open fire, Admiral? Commander Vex asked. Not yet. Let them get closer. I want to see the look on that human's face when he realizes his pathetic ship cannot even scratch our hulls. The Liberty continued its approach, accelerating steadily. Zektar's sensors showed it reaching impressive speeds for such a primitive vessel, but speed alone would not save them. Sir, the sensor operator said, his voice puzzled. I'm detecting some kind of launch from the human ship, multiple small objects being released. Zektar looked at his display. Dozens of tiny dots appeared around the Liberty, too small to be missiles, too numerous to be escape pods. What are they? He demanded. Unknown, sir. They appear to be simple metallic spheres. No energy signatures, no guidance systems. They're just balls of metal. Kithara spoke up from her station. Admiral, this could be some sort of primitive kinetic weapon. Ancient civilizations sometimes use solid projectiles fired from magnetic accelerators. Zektar's laugh was even harsher than before. Metal balls? They're throwing metal balls at us? Do they think we're still in the Stone Age? The spheres are accelerating, Admiral, the sensor operator reported. They're moving very fast. How fast? Zektar asked, still amused. Sir, they're approaching significant fractions of light speed. 0.8. 0.9. 0.95. The amusement drained from Zektar's face. That's impossible. Nothing with mass can reach those speeds. 0.96, sir. 0.97. Commander Vex's compound eyes were fixed on his own displays. Admiral, at those speeds, even a small mass would carry enormous kinetic energy. They're still just balls of metal, Zektar snapped. But uncertainty crept into his voice. Sir, the tactical officer called out. Impact in 30 seconds. Zektar looked at the main display. The tiny metal spheres were invisible now, moving too fast for normal sensors to track. But the computer could calculate their trajectories, and those trajectories led directly into the heart of his fleet. Raise shields, he ordered. All ships, maximum defensive power. Across the fleet, 50,000 vessels activated their energy barriers. Glowing fields of force surrounded each ship, designed to deflect or absorb any attack. Impact in 10 seconds, the tactical officer announced. Zektar gripped the arms of his command chair. Around him, his crew watched their instruments with growing alarm. The metal spheres were too small to see, too fast to track, but they carried the momentum of relativistic physics. 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. The galaxy held its breath. The first sphere hit the hegemony dreadnought Vextal Dominance at 97% the speed of light. The ball of metal, no bigger than a human fist, carried the kinetic energy of a small star. It passed through the ship's energy shields like they weren't there, punched through the bioorganic hull like tissue paper, and continued through the entire vessel in a microsecond. The dreadnought simply came apart. 2 kilometers of advanced alien engineering became an expanding cloud of superheated plasma, glowing bright enough to blind unprotected eyes. The explosion lit up space like a new sun being born, but that was just the beginning. Admiral Zektar had exactly enough time to register the destruction of the Vextal Dominance before 17 more spheres slammed into ships around it. Each impact released the same devastating energy. Massive battlecruisers that had conquered worlds vanished in flashes of brilliant light. The perfect formation of the hegemony fleet began to dissolve into chaos. Shields. Raise the shields. Zektar screamed, but his orders were meaningless. Energy barriers designed to stop plasma beams and particle weapons were useless against simple matter, moving at relativistic speeds. The metal spheres passed through the most advanced defensive systems in the galaxy, like they were made of air. Captain Jake Miller watched from the bridge of the Liberty as the enemy fleet began to die. The tactical display showed red dots disappearing one by one, each representing a ship and its crew vanishing from existence. It should have been horrifying, but these were the same aliens who had threatened to burn Earth and kill every human alive. Direct hits on targets 1 through 50, Lisa Carter reported from her tactical station. Her voice was calm and professional, but Jake could see the satisfaction in her eyes. Second wave away. Another volley of metal spheres launched from the Liberty's kinetic drives. These were aimed at the larger ships in the center of the enemy formation, the command vessels and heavy cruisers that formed the backbone of hegemony power. Pete Johnson monitored the launches from his engineering console. All systems nominal, Captain. We can keep this up for another 10 minutes if needed. It won't be needed, Jake said quietly. He had studied the psychology reports on the hegemony species. They were used to winning through overwhelming technological superiority. They had never faced an enemy that could destroy their most advanced ships with what they considered primitive weapons. The second wave of spheres found their targets. The Zentari flagship Glory of Conquest took a direct hit amidships and split in half, its bioluminescent hull flickering and dying like a wounded animal. A cluster of Veltar destroyers tried to scatter, but 3 spheres caught them in a chain reaction of destruction that lit up an entire sector of space. Admiral, Commander Vex shouted from his station aboard the Eternal Dominion. We've lost 2,000 ships. Our formation is breaking apart. Zektar stared at his tactical display in disbelief. Red indicators showed destroyed vessels scattered across the battlefield. Ships that had taken decades to grow and centuries to perfect were gone in seconds, reduced to glowing debris. How is this possible? He whispered. They're just throwing pieces of metal at us. But even as he spoke, Zektar began to understand the terrible simplicity of what the humans had done. While the galaxy's civilizations had spent millennia perfecting energy weapons and exotic technologies, humanity had mastered something far more fundamental, the physics of motion. A projectile moving at 97% light speed didn't need exotic warheads or energy matrices. Einstein's equations turned simple mass into devastating force. The kinetic energy was so enormous that it didn't matter what the target was made of or how advanced its defenses were. Matter hitting matter at relativistic speeds followed only one rule: destruction. Sir, the communications officer called out. We're getting panic transmissions from across the fleet. Ships are requesting permission to retreat. Denied, Zektar snarled. We still outnumber them 48,000 to 1. But even as he gave the order, another wave of spheres tore through his fleet. The elegant Sarathi crystal ships shattered like glass. A wing of Krextal biofighters simply evaporated. The proud banner ships of a dozen species were reduced to expanding clouds of plasma and debris. Jake Miller observed the destruction with grim satisfaction. The hegemony had made 2 crucial mistakes. First, they had assumed that advanced meant better. Second, they had packed their fleet into a tight formation to show off their numbers. Third wave away, Lisa Carter announced, targeting the remaining capital ships. The Liberty's kinetic drives launched another volley of metal spheres. These projectiles had been crafted in Earth's orbital factories, each one a perfect sphere of dense metal alloy. They contained no computers, no guidance systems, no exotic materials. They were just very heavy balls of metal accelerated to speeds that turned them into planet killers. Admiral Zektar watched his flagship's tactical display as another 1,000 red indicators vanished from the screen. The mighty hegemony fleet, the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history, was being systematically destroyed by a single human ship throwing metal balls. All vessels emergency scatter pattern, he ordered. Break formation and retreat to hyperspace jump distance. But it was too late for most of them. The humans had calculated their attack perfectly. The tight formation that was supposed to demonstrate hegemony power had become a killing ground. Ships trying to maneuver found themselves blocked by their own allies. Vessels attempting to charge their hyperspace drives were torn apart before they could escape. Fourth wave away, Lisa Carter reported. Targeting the fleeing vessels. Jake watched as the spheres chased down the retreating enemy ships. The projectiles were too fast to outrun and too small to target. Each one carried enough kinetic energy to crack a moon, and they found their targets with mathematical precision. The Sarathi command ship Eternal Glory tried to jump to hyperspace, but took a sphere through its drive core. The explosion was visible from 3 star systems away. A squadron of Veltar cruisers formed a defensive formation, but relativistic projectiles cared nothing for tactics or strategy. They passed through the entire squadron in a fraction of a second, leaving only debris. "Sir," Amy Rodriguez called from her communications station, "we're receiving a transmission from Admiral Zektar's flagship." "Put it through," Jake ordered. Zektar's face appeared on the main screen, but he looked nothing like the confident alien commander from an hour before. His yellow eyes were wide with shock, his scaled features showing an emotion that the translator rendered as desperation. "Human," he gasped. "Stop this madness." "We surrender. The hegemony fleet surrenders." Jake looked at the tactical display. Of the 50,000 ships that had approached Earth with threats of genocide, fewer than 3,000 remained. The greatest military force in galactic history had been reduced to scattered survivors fleeing in all directions. "I'm afraid it's too late for surrender, Admiral," Jake said calmly. "You should have thought of that before you threatened to burn my world." "Please," Zektar begged. "We didn't know. We didn't understand what humans were capable of." "No," Jake agreed. "You didn't." The final wave of kinetic projectiles launched from the Liberty. These were aimed at the remaining command ships, the vessels carrying the leaders who had voted to destroy Earth. Admiral Zektar had just enough time to see his death approaching at a significant fraction of light speed. The Eternal Dominion, flagship of the hegemony fleet, died in a flash of nuclear fire that could be seen from neighboring star systems. In less than 8 minutes, the largest fleet in galactic history had been reduced to glowing debris and a handful of survivors fleeing into deep space. The ship that was supposed to be primitive and harmless had proven that sometimes the simplest weapons were the most deadly. The galaxy would never be the same. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened 3 days after the battle. Representatives from 200 species gathered in the Great Chamber on the neutral world of Nexus Prime, their faces showing every emotion from shock to terror to barely concealed panic. Helen King, Earth's newly appointed ambassador, sat in what had been the human observer section just a week ago. Now she occupied a full member's chair at the main council table, placed between the Centauri delegate and the Altarian representative. The change in her seating arrangement said everything about how the galaxy's perspective on humanity had shifted. Helen was a career diplomat in her 50s. With short gray hair and intelligent brown eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, she had spent her entire adult life preparing for first contact with alien civilizations, but nothing in her training had prepared her for this moment. Council Speaker Yarden, an elderly Altarian with pale blue skin and large dark eyes, called the session to order. His voice carried through the chamber's translation system with barely controlled fear. "The Council recognizes the severity of recent events," he began. 3 days ago, a single human vessel engaged and destroyed the largest military fleet in galactic history. We have gathered to understand what this means for all our civilizations. A holographic display activated in the center of the chamber, showing footage from the battle. The assembled delegates watched in stunned silence as the hegemony fleet was systematically destroyed by what appeared to be simple metal projectiles. The images had been broadcast across the galaxy, and every species now knew that their most advanced weapons technology was useless against human kinetic weapons. Delegate Kexara of the Zentari Collective stood up. She was a tall insectoid being, whose compound eyes reflected the light of the hologram. "This is a threat to every civilized species in the galaxy," she declared, her voice buzzing with agitation. "The humans have demonstrated weapons of unimaginable destructive power. They must be contained before they destroy us all." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. Helen could see the fear in their alien faces, the same fear that had driven the hegemony to attack Earth in the first place. They were terrified of humanity, and terrified beings often made dangerous decisions. Helen stood up slowly. The chamber fell silent as hundreds of alien eyes focused on her. She was the first human to address the full Galactic Council, and her words would determine whether Earth faced peace or another war. "Honorable delegates," she began, her voice calm and steady, "I understand your fear. You've seen what human weapons can do, but I think you're missing the most important part of what happened 3 days ago." "And what is that?" Speaker Yar then asked. Admiral Zektar fired first. Helen gestured toward the holographic display which now showed the moments before the battle began. The hegemony fleet came to our solar system with threats of genocide. They demanded our surrender and promised to burn our world if we refused. Captain Miller and his crew were defending their home against an unprovoked attack. Delegate Thessera of the Veltar Union spoke up. She was a graceful being with flowing tentacle-like appendages and bioluminescent skin that currently pulsed with agitated red patterns. But the scale of destruction, 50,000 ships destroyed in minutes. This level of military power upsets the balance of the entire galaxy. Helen nodded. You're absolutely right. It does upset the balance, but not in the way you think. She activated her own holographic projector, showing technical diagrams of the Liberty's kinetic weapons. These are not exotic superweapons. Their metal spheres accelerated to high speed. The technology is simple enough that any species in this chamber could build similar weapons if they chose to. The chamber erupted in surprised chatter. Delegate Morgoth of the Hegemony Remnant Forces stood up, his scaled face showing disbelief. Impossible. Our scientists have analyzed the battle footage. The energy requirements alone would drain the power core of our largest ships. That's because you're thinking about it wrong, Helen replied. You're trying to understand human engineering using alien assumptions. We don't use energy to accelerate our projectiles. We use physics. She activated another display, showing a simplified diagram of the kinetic drive system. Every species in this galaxy developed energy weapons because they're clean, precise, and controllable. But humans took a different path. We studied the fundamental forces of the universe and found a simpler solution. Dr. Pete Johnson's voice came through the communication system from Earth. He had been monitoring the session and was ready to explain the technical details. The math is actually pretty basic, he said. Kinetic energy equals 1/2 mass times velocity squared. When you get the velocity high enough, even a small mass carries enormous energy. We just figured out how to make things go really, really fast. The alien delegates stared at the diagrams in growing comprehension. What they were seeing wasn't advanced alien technology or exotic physics. It was engineering so simple that most of their civilizations had dismissed it as primitive thousands of years ago. Delegate Zorath of the Crystalline Collective spoke in a voice like ringing chimes. You mean to tell us that your most powerful weapons are based on throwing rocks very fast? Essentially, yes, Helen replied, though we prefer to call them kinetic projectiles. But why? Asked Delegate Kexara. Why choose such a crude approach when energy weapons are so much more elegant? Helen smiled. Because crude works. Your energy shields can deflect plasma beams and particle streams, but they can't stop a chunk of metal moving at 97% of light speed. Your armor can absorb energy weapons, but it can't survive the impact of a relativistic projectile. You built defenses against the weapons you understood. You never considered defending against the weapons you thought were obsolete. The implications of her words sank into the chamber like stones dropping into still water. Every species present had invested centuries in developing energy-based military technology. Their fleets, their defenses, their entire strategic doctrine was built around energy weapons and exotic technologies. And now they learned that all of it was useless against simple kinetic projectiles. Speaker Yar then leaned forward in his chair. Ambassador King, what does humanity want from the galaxy? Helen had been preparing for this question since the battle ended. The same thing we've always wanted. To be left alone to develop in peace. We never asked to be part of your galactic politics. We never wanted to conquer other worlds or rule over alien species. We just wanted to explore the stars and learn about the universe. And if other species develop kinetic weapons like yours? Asked Delegate Thessara. Then the galaxy will have to learn to solve its problems with words instead of weapons, Helen replied. Because when everyone has planet-killing kinetic projectiles, war becomes too dangerous for anyone to survive. The chamber was quiet for a long moment, as the delegates considered her words. Finally, Delegate Morgoth spoke up. What about the survivors of the Hegemony fleet? What happens to them? Helen's expression softened. Those ships contain thousands of beings who were following orders from their leaders. They're free to return home to their families. Humanity has no quarrel with soldiers who are doing their duty. But their leaders are dead, Morgoth pointed out. Yes, Helen said simply. The beings who decided to threaten genocide against Earth died with their ships. That was their choice, not ours. Speaker Yarthen stood up. The council will recess to consider these revelations. We will reconvene tomorrow to discuss the new political situation. As the delegates filed out of the chamber, Helen remained in her seat, watching the holographic display that still showed the technical diagrams of human kinetic weapons. In 3 days, everything had changed. Humanity had gone from being ignored primitives to the most feared military power in the galaxy. But fear was not the same as respect, and Helen knew that her real work was just beginning. 6 months after the battle, Admiral Jake Miller stood on the observation deck of Earth's newest orbital station, watching ships from a dozen different species dock at the commercial bays. Centauri trade vessels unloaded exotic materials. Altarian science ships carried researchers eager to study human engineering. Even former hegemony worlds sent diplomatic missions, their representatives bearing gifts and treaties of friendship. The transformation had been remarkable. The same galaxy that had dismissed humans as primitive animals now competed for their attention and protection. Trade agreements replaced ultimatums. Research partnerships flourished where threats had once been issued. The human approach to kinetic warfare had not just changed military strategy. It had changed everything. Jake wore the uniform of the new Terran Defense Force, with 4 stars on his collar marking his promotion to Admiral of the Fleet. The Liberty had returned to Earth as the most famous ship in galactic history, its crew treated as heroes. But Jake took no pleasure in fame. He had seen too many alien ships die in those 8 minutes of destruction. "Admiral," came a voice behind him. Jake turned to see Captain Lisa Carter approaching, her own uniform now bearing the insignia of a full captain. She had been promoted to command the newest human warship, the UES Constitution, which was currently on patrol near the Centauri border. "Lisa," Jake said with a smile, "how did the patrol go?" "Quiet, sir." 3 Centauri cargo ships requested escort through the asteroid field near Alpha Centauri. They're still nervous about pirates, even though most of the galaxy's criminal organizations disbanded after news of our weapons spread. Jake nodded. The battle had eliminated more than just the hegemony fleet. Word of human kinetic weapons had spread through the underworld faster than through official channels. Pirate clans, criminal syndicates, and warlords throughout the galaxy had suddenly found themselves facing the possibility that any ship they attacked might be carrying weapons that could destroy planets. Most had decided that piracy was no longer a profitable career. "Any word from the Veltar delegation?" Jake asked. "They're still requesting a defense treaty, same as the Crystalline Collective, the Sorathi Republic, and the Andorian Trade Union. Everyone wants human ships patrolling their space." Jake walked over to the viewport and gazed out at the stars. The irony was not lost on him. Humanity had never wanted to be a military power. They had developed kinetic weapons as a last resort, a way to defend Earth against threats they couldn't match with conventional technology. Now they found themselves reluctantly assuming the role of galactic peacekeepers. "Sir," Lisa said quietly, "do you ever regret what we did?" Jake considered the question carefully. "I regret that it was necessary. Those 50,000 ships contained millions of beings. They had families, dreams, hopes for the future, but they came to our solar system threatening genocide. If we hadn't stopped them, every human would be dead." Through the viewport, they could see a group of human ships preparing to depart for the Rigel sector. The UES Franklin, UES Jefferson, and UES Adams were escorting a convoy of Altarian research vessels to study a newly discovered neutron star. Each human ship carried enough kinetic weapons to sterilize a planet, but they were being used to protect scientists and explorers. Dr. Pete Johnson emerged from the station's engineering section, his uniform showing the rank of Chief Engineer for the entire Terran Defense Force. His promotion had come with the responsibility of overseeing the production of kinetic drive systems for humanity's growing fleet. "Admiral," Pete said, "I've got the latest production reports. We'll have 25 new ships ready for launch by the end of the month. The shipyards at Luna and Mars are running at full capacity." "Any requests for technology transfer?" Jake asked. Pete grimaced. "Dozens. Every species in the galaxy wants to know how we build our kinetic drives. The Centauri are offering to trade their gravity manipulation technology. The Altarians want to share their quantum computing systems. The former hegemony worlds are practically begging us to teach them, and our response? Same as always. We'll share basic research but not the weapons technology. The galaxy doesn't need more planet killers. Jake approved of this policy. Humanity had learned that their kinetic weapons were not just devastatingly effective, they were also relatively easy to build once you understood the principles. Any species with basic manufacturing capability could construct relativistic projectiles. The only thing preventing a galactic arms race was human restraint in sharing the technology. Ambassador Helen King's voice came through the station's communication system. She was broadcasting from the Galactic Council chambers on Nexus Prime, where she had just finished addressing the latest session. The Council has voted unanimously to accept humanity's proposal for the Galactic Peace Accords, her voice announced. All member species agree to resolve disputes through diplomatic means rather than military force. Any species that breaks this agreement will face intervention by the Terran Defense Force. Jake smiled at the news. The peace accords were humanity's attempt to create lasting stability in the galaxy. Rather than allowing the various species to develop their own kinetic weapons and start a devastating arms race, the accords established humans as neutral peacekeepers. It was a role they had never sought, but one they seemed uniquely qualified to fill. "Admiral," Lisa said, "there's something I've been wondering about. Why do you think we succeeded where other species failed? I mean, the math behind kinetic weapons isn't that complex. Any civilization should have been able to figure it out." Jake thought about her question for a moment. "I think it's because other species were too clever for their own good. They saw simple kinetic weapons as primitive beneath their advanced civilizations. They spent thousands of years developing energy weapons and exotic technologies because those seemed more sophisticated." He gestured toward the viewport, where alien ships continued to dock at the station. Humans took a different approach. We looked at the fundamental laws of physics and asked a simple question: what's the most efficient way to destroy something? The answer turned out to be making a heavy object go very fast. Pete Johnson joined them at the viewport. "There's another factor too," he said. "Most alien species developed their technology gradually over millions of years. They had time to explore every possible avenue, to perfect every system. Humans had to catch up fast. We couldn't afford to waste time on elegant solutions. We needed something that worked. And sometimes the simple solution is the best solution," Lisa added. Jake nodded. The battle had been decided not by advanced technology or superior tactics, but by basic physics applied with human determination. While the galaxy's civilizations had been perfecting energy matrices and bioorganic hulls, humans had been studying Newton's laws and Einstein's equations. Through the communication system, they could hear reports from human ships throughout the galaxy. The UES Washington was mediating a border dispute between the Zentari and the Veltar. The UES Lincoln was escorting humanitarian supplies to refugee camps in former hegemony space. The UES Roosevelt was investigating reports of piracy in the Outer Rim territories. Each mission was a reminder of how much the galaxy had changed. 6 months ago, these same species had been preparing for war, building fleets and stockpiling weapons. Now they were trading, exploring, and working together under the protection of human kinetic weapons. "Do you think it will last?" Lisa asked. "The peace, I mean." Jake looked out at the stars, thinking of all the civilizations that had learned to fear and respect human weapons in equal measure. "As long as everyone remembers what happened to the hegemony fleet, yes. Fear can be a powerful motivator for peace. But what about when new species join the galaxy?" Pete asked. "Species that haven't heard the story, that don't understand what human weapons can do." "Then we'll have to teach them," Jake said quietly. Hopefully with words instead of demonstrations. The Liberty was visible through the viewport, now serving as a training ship for new human officers. Its hull bore the scars of battle, but also the honors of a dozen peaceful missions. It had become more than a warship. It had become a symbol of what humanity could accomplish when pushed to the edge. As Jake watched, a group of young officers boarded the Liberty for their first patrol mission. They would carry the responsibility of maintaining peace in a galaxy that had learned to respect human power. It was a heavy burden, but one that humanity had accepted. The ship that had shattered the galactic fleet in seconds had given birth to an era of peace that might last for centuries. Sometimes, Jake reflected, the best way to prevent war was to demonstrate just how terrible war could be. In the end, humanity had not conquered the galaxy through superior technology or ancient wisdom. They had earned their place among the stars through simple physics, applied with devastating efficiency. And perhaps that was the most human thing of all. finding the practical solution to an impossible problem.